compassion के लिए great compassion के खोज जो कल बोला ना ये bodhicitta ना ये चंबा क्या ये भी ये है जो कल बता था कि जो दूसरा का हम दुख देखते ना फिर उनको हम क्या बोला दुखने से जो बचा करने के लिए ना ये क्या बोलते हैं उसको जो दुख होता है उसको हम देखेंगे तो हम इसे रख नहीं पाएंगे कुछ न कुछ करना है मैं खुद करूँगी ऐसा सोचना है ना जो दूसरे का जो दुख देख के मैं खुद उस दुख से मिटा करूँगी है ना ऐसा सोच कोई निजी चंबू रोज ठीक रहा निजी चंबू जी रोज कर रहे है ना ग्रेट कंपैशन का कॉसेस क्या है
receiving end. Ini moi tiyo dir. Tanganzogi susula ningji tobe ningji rae.
미시바 hinjiraya.
되게 일렌지 주 가르쳐게 그랬어.
수술 hinjiraya. 수술 hinjiraya 되다 수술이 메사로서나 믹스 hin지다. 라. 아 kunhinje 냠주다 미 야부지나라이다. 믹다 파게 들라라리기. 미 가셔야 돈주 쟁이가라. 미 운에게 치를 내마지나 코페 냠주주래 아버지나 들레지지 갈 hin지제기. 그 hin제라네 들로버체나 따도체나 마리다. 라. 아니 소소게 가지 전부 nga to me la ngaji chimbu control chimbu 되는 대신 미스이네 다른도라 캐나다 강이 티디가라 대스 좀 치니까 가보러지.
So if we think about it practically, it's quite simple. If we have an attitude of humility and we have integrity, then when we find ourselves in moments of weakness and when we find ourselves struggling, then that attitude of humility in itself and the manner in which we live our lives with integrity attracts people first. People grow closer to us and our interactions are more meaningful as a result of that. So we, now for lack of a better word, we are at the receiving end of compassion. Now as opposed to that, if we are very egotistic, arrogant, very selfish, then the interactions we have with people are not that meaningful. The relationships that we build we're not able to sustain them. Then we grow apart from people first. Then as a result, we become isolated. We feel lonely after a while. So as such, then people really do not kind of approach you. And as such, it is difficult for people first to develop compassion, because when they see that you are very arrogant, egotistical, then it's difficult. So from this kind of experiences, we can gauge how do we exactly attract compassion. Did tune to watch to not get best?
So I want to understand if there is a difference between compassion from sentient beings and great compassion that comes from enlightened beings and Buddhas with
Tene tiwa di dirt. Tanda nganzugi namjuda doa ritu gira. Koa nala korgengi doa ritu gi ene patsula ninji ra. Gomela soba thans ra. Ene ta pagbejibu ra. Sanjela soba ra. Tendeji ene ninji chimbola na gomeji ra. Dini barala chebari yore bes.
지당이 희지기 돌에 진이기 돌에 좁아 모여라. 지당 희지를 오 간다지는 제지 동해를 나디에나. 들을 마세비로 들 희지라라. 난 희지 너는 가도 희지를 해도 마체 잠도 희지 쇼레어도 시기다. 라. 소소이년다 년대다 톡보 톡모를 강이 주는 아 따티 베 셈바 마스여제. 근데 지금 또 놓치고. 한 신바지를라네. 대지 칼로. 시라지 스네 메디기로. 셀라 전화 시라 메디. 드레슬리다. 다 니제 첨불라 오드가라 다 처랑이 예나래 다이네 집었다도 라 다니 파르마 창말 그미미 드시지가니 아니 심제 타제기 다 둥게 가리네라 제중 간데질 미와이나 딜레 텐드다 드네기 로쳐지 라 드니기 쳐보다 심면은 간주 니제라 가서 간 니제라 그냥 착받던데디로 아 릴리
So of course there is a difference. As we talked about before, when we are talking about the awakening mind, then we talk about first doing away with all conceptions of nearness and farness that we develop with regards to the relationships that we build with other sentient beings. Now, the compassion that is cultivated and the compassion that we practice as sentient beings is always tinged with prejudice, with a sense of attachment. Because this is very, very evident, because it is easier for us to feel a sense of compassion to who we call our near and dear ones. And then with regards to people who we do not really have a relationship with, we are apathetic. We do not really care. And then as opposed to that, with people whom we consider our enemies and so forth, whom we do not particularly like, it is very, very difficult for us to feel a sense of compassion. So this highlights the fact that our sense of compassion is informed by our prejudices and by a sense of attachment and aversion. Now the great compassion that realized beings have cultivated and do practice is different. It has done away with all these sense of prejudices, these sense of attachment. This kind of great compassion does not begin to differentiate along the lines of someone being your friend, near, enemy, or a neutral relation. As we all discussed extensively, one is advised to develop an attitude of equanimity, looking at all sentient beings as one and same in being deserving of our compassion. That is what we mean by great compassion. And we need to understand the nature of compassion itself. We already discussed that compassion means the wish to free someone from the suffering that they are going through. So we need to be able to develop such a wish towards all sentient beings if it must constitute as a great form of great compassion. Questions?
You talked about the three principal aspects. The first one was renunciation. My question, although maybe out of context, but this renunciation encompasses what all actually? This renunciation encompasses what all exactly?
What exactly is this renunciation?
Exactly, like we are renunciating everything, or is it only the negative qualities or negative aspects, or some afflictions?
The theodir to the nganzo nijung le lamzo nasum nano Thangpa de nijung re song ras nijung namda chi gor song ras nijung la de zamba da koa la nyewa che gore song go ras ani di la de zamba ani koa gi namba thamje la sra ani nyeba che gore la ge re be sra yana sra ani chik duge cha ra nyomong gi namba jeng gi ra cha de zula ani nyeba che gore la ge re sra koada tsama pangore ana khare lagi ore bes nijung le thi
sipa kwa le jara khoi dungi la digala ta khala ta ga kidangi tandae gi tile ngando kwa la khodi bine ko ngando gi dewaro soyena dewa chini pa marada ra junno ne dungi ngo juro ya tendisito tende indigala ta tende dewa jida tende tarabachitaguna saje komando ra tendiji mata pato ngando la chik zanzo chiwuna zanzo dogo pena ando nima chiga shana shuge tisi nima sha chiwuro yandine chawaje yandine jindamanda jowa chigle digdo ra tende do chimdo ngando bedo korota kiwu chi chanji reyo mara yan zanzo ti paru dubo yan chibo ande 진짜 근데 대화 템포 잘라야 대화 만져봐 뒤때 땐도 더해 봐. 다 단다도 빼서라. 다 거에 동일을 내가 나도 이 사제기 좋아 대화 챙이 버리 쳐대오라. 그래서 오늘 전에 대화 말에 그 코알 코디를 코알에 안에 코야기 가서 주망부지 싸대오라. 근데 뭐임바 아니 찍기 등에 짠에 밥빵 도야지. 근데 지기 알아. 상담 거야지.
근데 단다간 저 준준나라니 지금
지대 대화 지대 대화 지니바 대거란 된들래 지대 대화 지니바 대거란 된들 지대 동에 지니바 대거 젠된들 중래 들래
지금 대화 지니바라 대 아니 동에 대랑데 될 중앙체 라
지대 대화 지니바 지대 대화 지니바 대거 젠된들 지대 동에 지니바 대거란 된들 세상하잖아.
So herein, when we are talking about developing true renunciation, we need to understand first the purpose of renunciation and the renunciation in the context of cultivating a spiritual path. Now, what exactly is the purpose of a spiritual path? A spiritual path should offer us the means to overcome the suffering as well as the challenges that we face, because more often than not we suffer more as a reaction, as a consequence of the reaction we have to our suffering. We suffer more. So as such, it is first important to recognize that the nature of our existence itself is conditioned by suffering, right? And this is the first step of renunciation. To understand that the nature of our existence itself is marked by suffering. When we are able to accept this, then our response and reaction to suffering is not so emotional anymore or pronounced. There is a sense of acceptance. And here, now, now exploring this further, we already talked about spirituality, spirituality as the concern to be liberated from suffering. So then, if we are not able to recognize suffering as suffering, if we are not able to recognize the true nature of our existence, then we will be enchanted with our own existence, with its fleeting moments of pleasures, equating that with happiness, when in essence this is not true happiness. Right? So in order for us to aspire to a true sense of happiness, we must be able to develop a sense of renunciation, in the sense that we must be disenchanted with samsaric existence and all the kind of fleeting pleasures of samsaric existence. When we are able to do that, then we have the means to strive for true spirituality. Now, when we say that all these kind of pleasures, prosperity that we equate with happiness in samsara is not true happiness, then what exactly is the source of true happiness? So Shantideva points out in his work, Bodhicharya Avatara, the engaging the deeds of the Bodhisattva. And it's a very simple verse, and it makes a lot of sense. All the happiness in this world comes from wishing happiness for others. And all the suffering in this world comes from wishing happiness only for yourself.
너 군두야 세서다. 다대 전지 등에다 양다 지와 맞이나. 사제니도 민두비 콜라야 되어미스. 라. 저 땐데 대화지 되거나 사제 고바 맞다 봐도 아니 근데 이 대화 진이봐도 요 말았으라. 근데 시대다.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama repeatedly stresses this, that from the Buddhist perspective, when we are talking about spirituality and the practice of spirituality, then the concern is achieving the ultimate form of happiness, or true happiness, a happiness that is able to sustain itself, a happiness that remains in its entity as a happiness, one that doesn't change into suffering. So as such, unless and until we are able to achieve liberation and enlightenment, it is very, very difficult for us to, unless and until we achieve and strive to achieve enlightenment and liberation, it is very, very difficult for us to achieve and attain a true sense of happiness. Yeah, here.
So we're talking about achieving happiness, and we're talking about not reacting in anger. So we have these afflictions, and we know that we should not react like that. But when something happens, something triggers us, in the moment, what can we practically do? Because in that moment, I find myself forgetting about Buddhist practices. In that moment, I find myself reacting. So what are some practical methods to calm down?
Tamoi dittiwadir ani nganzogi da so di da mezigi nimbola naira gobadi ni dijiduwe dirwas ani dijiduwa lasra ani nyomongi suzugi da kunjui naira loina nyomongi shewando tongayo mari sungyorwas ta yina yansra ani kabla thedu zambasra ani lamsang suzu semsur shukshimbo shiwjigi dos kondo ina kondo sachojo ra dinde chagi dos this chen nyamba nyamdo cheyung de zambasra ta kap thedu zambasra ani chik nyomon la na ani chik rangsheni jala ani nöchigen yimba do na dinde samno shida chikhan khorgi mendo was khor khak bor was 시장 갑 대두 갑 덴델라 체인도 좀 많이 카요라이 지스라 수수기 띠스 냠레 칸데스 치네 동네 쳐버려 베스 되죠
아니 남자 전도 삼바에 개청보라 내가 콘도기서 예미로 삼단 라 콘도로지를 채우나 그러나 미집에 세발 흘려도 치나 라 다시 콘도라는 거는 어떻게 동시로도야 라 콘도기 예미 상으라 동바지로야 식네 진의 차시 파도야 진의 그게 가르치고 있는 이마치기 제 참아 추루다 뭐 쇼게 콘도 추춤부질라나 라 근데 또 참아 콘도기 예미 있으면다 라 알리 근데 차이도 아니 수수기 레가지 체네 따따도 제마도야 가르치와네 파투데제도 찌잖아 투데 찌기 레가 가르치는 칼라서나 찌디제로 칼라나고 콘도기 샤만 넣어서도 에너지 차이다 라 타마들 니 쿠네 니 아버지 용금다 콘도 추천부질라네 고다니 쿠네 니 아버지 쿠마 또 부선소바 세 부선소바지 페이 너라 샤이나 트라이만 라 그거도 좀 희제부 가르치 거이나 콘도지 사타나 니 스스로 칼로 대지로 초입니다 당부 콘도기 아니 이미 상고야 돼 백기 전부라 남자 주는 상고야 하면도 남들 콘도 카트 라마다 간 상 투카보다 남자 주는 콘도 라네 데네 레샤 다 딜레 파자체 무슨 나타와이나 아니 콘도 라와이나 아니 게시다 저 콘도 라자 로닐 아니 네치다 이통사 다 게시 밀 파네 바치와이나 네발라 네레지 제와이나 아니 파길라 네야 강이 지수로 디스와 잠기 캐나라 대화라기래라 라기 말해 라 캐나라 제래야 주바지 지기라 파이들 징징 투어다 세투어 가르치 지와이나 디젤라 칭나버지 라와이나 또 밀렘버로 있는 것들이 쇼라투슬라나 가도 커버마도 제락 그런 주바지 얘기 시차오라 라 근데 인주가 캐나라인데 근데 pen 미지기 싫어는 컨트롤 질라네 춘주질 캐나라 저바 고메이나 디 강에 들리기 말아 계속 저 저바 먹어 콜라 카티자 넘을 시와이나 파기드가 미리 코에니 모셔와저 코 인다마들라디가라 춘이기 비트코라 메들 마스나 쳇쳇다셔라 와 딘도라 땐 단도처럼 박컬레로에는 코랑이 아니 셴바요라 다 코랑이 토모 참아라요라 캐나라고나야 저랑 토모도 제 로바체 콜라 카티자나 마르마르마르 버루 tombo스 저랑 미니 게제 이바이나 우리 나밀라 버티도야 lumbar bate tomba thida lumbar thida thaine jekabla ra mi gi thuba jekho tsadel ronyora tinde do chasikda tuzugi nimi sawe ra kesi ngani ni je jibu na mo nga jila nge ka shawaine tsawani ngi zane tupsa ta yanja ya phemda nge para da ban an dine ya mar ani mi nam do mar kashi dile thebata kashi ndamandas chetche duda tinde tambu khundogi nimi sawe chikche 단다데 님이 다 오늘 콘 zuba goma 근데 zuba goma 이나라 가르 편도도 이런데 렌데 켈렌지네 세들라에 펴 제와 심말라에 펴 와 엔치 진디네시나 dila dewa, so kala ina troayo, ni ina chibukuba, trobo ina mardoa, ra, ani susula chichina mardoa, susu gegi gedujina, ziton ina cherdo. And Namshu gonna mirror Ranshing Zamboji, Karangi, Lukangi, Tudela, Pemba. Namduni in the Santa dinner, Kangitin Dugala, Kolacha of the Pejadayara. Namduni be control the Pay Abore and Yakati Chatun and Disusa, Koto de Lea, Roberto Chidina, Mune control the Katumara. Namdun Tadigo at the Pekacham.
So herein, when we say that what can we practically do in the moment when we are at the cusp of reacting out of anger to a particular situation, it is important to understand that when we are talking about our practice, practice does not mean that we react to a particular instance of an adverse situation and that constitutes our practice. This is not what we mean. When we look at the word practice, it means practicing in our daily lives. So it is not that only at the moment you feel angry that you are beginning to practice something in its place. So it is important to first understand what exactly do we mean by practice. Practice does not mean in an instant, in a particular instant that you try to cultivate a practice. You have to have a daily practice wherein you begin to, it is important to contemplate and observe. It is important to observe the mind daily and then to contemplate the different emotions that arises in the mind on a daily basis. And then, for example, with the particular emotion of anger, then in our daily lives, we should be able to, as part of our practice, contemplate as a part of our practice on the negative effects of anger in our daily lives. And through that contemplation, we begin to understand the real life consequences of acting out of anger, how it affects us. So look at the simple consequences. For example, when you are angry, your facial expression changes and that expression is not so appealing. And 2, then your blood pressure rises, which is not really healthy for you. Then similarly, any kind of activity that you try to undertake, when you are consumed by anger, you are not able to see it through effectively. And then your whole day, if in the morning, the moment you wake up, you become angry, then your whole day becomes messed up. And then similarly, your sleep is affected. And then even if you eat the best of foods, if you are angry, you do not enjoy it. Even if you put on the best of clothes, when you are angry, then you do not really enjoy what you are wearing. Yes? So these are the kind of simple effects that it has on our experience. Then think about the consequences it has now when you begin to act out of anger. Say someone says something harsh to you, and then if you retaliate in a similar fashion, then does it make you happy? First, acting out of anger. Then even though in the immediate moment you might feel a sense of respite, relief, but this will give into a sense of regret, unease later on. And then 2, does it really help to address the situation? No, it aggravates the situation. It actually inflicts more suffering onto ourselves as well as others. And then similarly, how when you retaliate out of anger in such a situation, the conflict becomes aggravated. The other person, not only does the other person react, then those who support him, his family, friends, becomes involved in the situation. Then this can go on to include neighborhoods, communities. Yes, these are real life implications of acting out of anger. And now, did it really address the situation effectively? Not at all. So we need to be able to realistically contemplate these implications and consequences in our daily lives. This is what practice is. And then when through that contemplation, you come to a place of conviction that indeed anger is not good. Acting out of anger does not make sense. So that when you do this repeatedly again and again, when the moment arrives, when you are at the risk of becoming angry, you are able to immediately kind of restrain yourself. That's the culmination of practice. It is not the case that we will be able to instantly kind of restrain ourselves through daily contemplation and practice. Now, from a broader perspective, from the Buddhist perspective, we kind of extend this contemplation further. We talk about how anger does not only affect us in this life, but it has also consequences in the next life. So we kind of broaden our motivation in this manner. And also think about, in its place, if you do not act out of anger and restrain yourself and practice forbearance, what are the benefits? We need to be able to contemplate on that too. What are the implications? And we begin to realize that if the relationships and our reactions to situation is marked by a sense of forbearance, then these interactions are marked by a sense of intimacy, closeness, faith, trust, love. These kind of love, faith, trust grows in the interactions because we are able to cultivate a sense of forbearance. So, for example, if I may add to this as a translator, think about it in this manner. If we kind of try to think about it practically, say you had a fight with someone, and then you become angry. At first, you become angry by thinking about what the other person did wrong, right? How they inflicted a sense of harm, how you become angry. And through thinking about the reasoning, you become more angry. And then when the person is not in front of you, you are still angry and you go back to your room, and then you begin to harp on and think about the same things again. Wow, what he did was really, really unjustified. And then you become more angry. And then there comes a point wherein when you keep holding on to that anger and thinking about that anger, there comes a point wherein you do not need to think about the reason at all. That when you see the person's face, you become angry, right? So this is a misguided contemplation from my perspective. We are able to naturally react out of anger. So as opposed to this, we need to develop a wise way of contemplating on the negative consequences of anger repeatedly, and then come the time when we face an adverse situation, we are able to naturally restrain ourselves and practice tolerance.
So when I contemplate on how I reacted, what follows is shame and guilt. So I blame myself and I feel guilty that I could not react in the right way. Is that also an affliction? And what are the negative consequences of shame and guilt? How do we deal with it?
Tadi kunzu dilayda nganzo ta sosogi kisi nölenda wache ra kondrogi shiwando don nölenda wache nasra ani jine da ngai tharing suba gontu mason lene ra susu la ti semba busu do bochagi dos pena chashana ani susu ti ngotsa do wache ya tina shi susu da re mason ra ani dindegi chowa chaboshu chimbo chigi dos ra dindegi chowa che de ni nyomon rebes ra ani di la donglen khande chego rebes
Titi chene yabura, jebara. Susugi migewa che shaju dila. Tanganti maso, yabu che maso dana, susugi di chewa ina. Jeba chewa zangi ani kalata. Diba ma taayagi, tebro chagora. Chini ani jeba chewa zangi mayimba, ta shinji ni nge mejesan, domse di goya peki chabura. Ra, tindi zoya. 다치 다기야 가서 저발에 가는 저기 단다치 미스 나오는 가서 좋아 컨트롤 미치 또 대시라 다에 산의 자신 못 나와 있는 산지 롱데 된다 가서 진배로지 투지되라도 단다디네요
shooting.
그래서 가리는 시간 간다 저백이 존재버 치와 치고라스라 장한테 저 심한 되는 뭐 고고래 아니 치 소소 주자 란서야 되네 고 사말 고고라 고알라 되네 디기 주카라네 저버고마 되질때 치고라스다
땅안주기 ngotsa che bala jura wodi chi dishe jatna
rala de ngotsa sheba jelle de teba rala de ngotsa e bala digala susu mandi ba chena o tata di masolan susu la no ra rala de ngotsa sheba jelle de teba bala de susu la ke maje wa ina tadi chena digo mane mi tsama ge di che de maresha ti chi mi gi je ngosu ne ga maje jura jelle de teba.
So before we kind of explore, before we kind of discuss this, I think it is important to address how, from the Buddhist perspective, we look at shame and embarrassment. Now, guilt doesn't really figure into it from the Buddhist perspective, and shame and embarrassment are actually positive attitudes that one needs to cultivate with regards to non-virtuous actions. Shame is understood as that sense of reprimanding yourself, taking yourself as the basis that, oh, it is unbecoming of me to do something like that. Embarrassment is the process of reprimanding yourself, taking others into account. That, oh, it is totally wrong of me to do this kind of things in front of them or to them. So this is the place of shame and embarrassment in Buddhist practice. So if we understand this, then we realize that shame and embarrassment in themselves are not negative things in and of themselves. So how do we use a personal sense of shame and embarrassment to cultivate a practice? So this, we understand it in the context of developing a sense of regret over our actions. Actions herein referring to negative actions. So we should be able to develop a sense of regret over what we did wrong. And shame and embarrassment, our personal sense of shame and embarrassment will help us to develop that sense of regret. Now, is that regret in itself alone enough to cultivate an effective practice? Then it's not enough. Regret should regret should help us develop the resolve, a pure resolve, not to engage in similar negative actions again. So this is the manner in which we can process our shame and embarrassment to develop a true sense of regret on the non-virtuous actions that we have engaged in, and then to develop the resolve within ourselves not to engage in these negative actions ever again.
Yes.
So, are there any questions?
Dabdigalani te korgo ngel dab na de or digal dan na satangra ra zamna na khundu ye shewan ji de khenza da pena nachara la bara kayuru khashi ji khedo yo na ta kayu ji khar jing mandi ma sana lula ne shembadi ma cha cha da ta di chana khadu kholo la ra ine so so ta tai chik char ta shembadi ya bokhedan te pyeje da yo ra ta ko shembadi ma cha di gala ta di jel changma so ra de nga ji jom sa the Zamasogo or Sujuma Pichitanga Mare, Tikarani Kundugi, Nimira, Kundugi, Kundu de Latene, social change leader. To the Petri machine, we heard that. We know what Milan, Kansas Shuda, Kundu Lan, 6 inches, a bomb should edge da. Ra. The other than the Jibber, Kaiji child and a chitty jaguar, the Dijan, and the meeting 6 inches lower the Latin, but 6 months by love, I should do that. Ra. Think on the Kundu, the Kama. Shuman is Zuma the Yapo going, so by our gong. Tanda young Hamatala chance on my Abogomi.
So then I forgot to translate the last bit of what Geshema said. So when we look at the teachings in the Buddhist text, then as an antidote to anger, one is advised to cultivate love and forbearance. And in our meditation on forbearance, then in these texts it specifies that as a Buddhist, one should be able to contemplate on the positive consequences or the benefits of engaging, of cultivating forbearance. So it is in one of the particular texts, it says that that if you wish to be blessed with good physical appearance in your next life, then one of the causes would be your practice of forbearance. That if you practice forbearance well in this life, in your next life, you will have good physical appearance. And by the looks of it, all of you have practiced forbearance well in your previous lives. Now, coming back to our discussions about how we need to contemplate on the negative consequences of the manner in which we react to adverse and challenging situations. So as we discussed before, we suffer more as a consequence of our reaction to suffering. Now we need to understand this. We react to our suffering out of suffering out of a sense of anger, which is an affliction, out of a sense of attachment and so forth. So in this particular, let's look at the example of anger and how we suffer more as a consequence of our reaction to a particular suffering. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama recounts this story to highlight the fact that we suffer more as a consequence of our reaction. So back in Tibet, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in Tibet, there was a mechanic and he was working on a car and he was under the, what do we call it? Under the bonnet? Under the bonnet of the car. And then it happened that he bumped his head on the car. And then immediately out of anger, he began to bang his head again and again on the car. So the initial moment, he only struck his head once, but out of anger, he self-inflicted more harm upon himself. So similarly, this is an example. So similarly, we can all kind of relate to these examples. If, say, you are carrying a tray of porcelain bowls, and then as you are walking about, one bowl slips and it breaks. And then out of a sense of anger, it might be the case that you drop and throw the whole thing. Initially, only one bowl broke, but our reaction is to break the whole tray of bowls. So this is the manner in which we suffer more as a consequence of our reaction. And when we think about it carefully, this is the very misguided manner in which we react to our situations, and we suffer more as a result. So it is important to contemplate on this. If we are able to contemplate on this, then maybe we can come to a place wherein we realize that indeed it is not wise to react in this manner, because it will bring us more suffering. So please do not react in this manner.
I'll be very brief in what I wanted to know. So having said that, human birth is precious and we have freedom and advantages, I would like to know what's the role of merit. So just what is the role of accumulating merit? So is it just being born as human is enough, or we also need to simultaneously accumulate merit to meet the teacher, to meet the teachings, to meet the teacher and to meet the Sangha?
Tene nganzogi da tenjo miludi ni tsachimbo relan sungyo was. Ani teda tenjo miludi tsachimbo ina ani nganzogi gewa sa goba gi goba jera. Gewa da sonam tezu sago be ni goba di khare resra manzo ni mi chewa langnasra sunam da gyo di ni sagore besra ni tsechima la ni soso ta tamju ra tambe chu dan cheba ni shenye dan cheba lama da chebe che do ni nganzo gi sunam ji cho sagore be gyo drubure bes
du gura ra de penang chi 초지 사이나 소남기 초로 사이나 디긴데보다 초라는 이유라 소남기 초대 이식이 초니라 근데 소남기 초로 지나가서 갈라올나 지 소소 간내게 주체 샤체 주버피야 근데 다 가리는 샤체 계속 꼬라도 가리는 더 소남기 초라라 다 이식이 초에 나간 저기 지 러브노치니 라 집변의 지기 다나 저 배는 러브노 쓰대는 바지 치니 다 돈이 또 받아서 근데 요 소토와이나 소남기 초 싸워라 소남기 초도 전이 손을 대비고니 근데 싸고에 뺏기쳐물아 라 수수가 먼저 나란적이 레시소나 내가 친구 지내야 됩니다 저서 마음 방가라 이치도 이 땅내가 이치도 두대 아버지라야 다는 가서 매적 하듯이 쇼게 한번 나고래 댐담을 나고래 얘기들 지워티고래 로빠냠도 지다선 집안냠도 장고래 드네 수수그 파기 디가도 디가라 딱 수수그 텐제 참 무슨 소바 키고래 드네 파티 디가라 랜들라 따따 템부스 저거 다 같이 찍기 티와질로 나서 퍼퍼 자야 마라 랜 따따따따따 도도 산타고다 대땅원하시 드네 파티 운가라 짱가 야포치 파티 드네 파티 사디가라 수수 슌지체네 게 디주든디 되면 드네 슌지 수수 이치기 리저라 치불랑 저기 안데 갈리 저거다 드네 가서 껴 슈마 아니 된적이 밀리 때 상부터를 가서 갈리 저거다 라 듣고 왠지 고르스라 이미 이제 선언 못처럼 시기 초선 인지미지 공부 타산에 대 소소 되고야 말처럼 도와이나 대와이나 처럼 이 초소나 내가 가르친 산다야 돼 계셔브라
So of course it is important to accumulate merit in this life. Now when we talk about the accumulation of merit, we have to also talk about the accumulation of wisdom too. We say, from the Buddhist perspective, that enlightenment itself has a cause, it's not causeless. So the cause of enlightenment is the accumulation of merit and accumulation of wisdom. So what exactly do we mean by accumulation of wisdom? Wisdom herein ultimately refers to the wisdom of emptiness. So studying and contemplating on the wisdom of emptiness, coming to a correct philosophical understanding of emptiness. This is what we can at this point understand as the accumulation of wisdom. Now with regards to the accumulation of merit, it refers to our practice. Now practice in the sense of ritual too, as well as practice in the sense of generosity, forbearance, and so forth. So for example, making offerings, prostrating, making circumambulations, these are ritualistic practices which can help us to accumulate merit. And then there are also practices of generosity, of the perfections, generosity, ethical discipline, so on and so forth, which is the accumulation of merit or virtue, in other words. Now how do we make sense of this, that these are the causes of enlightenment? Now relate this to our own lives and think about how, if you want to perform well and do well in something, you cannot expect to do well with a wishful thinking. Merely aspiring to do well does not help us to do well. We have to put in the effort. So let's use the example of an exam that you have to appear for. So if you want to do well in these exams, you have to prepare beforehand. You have to apply yourself to your study, wake up early in the morning, make time for your studies, pay attention to your teachers in your classes, and that in itself is not also enough. During the examination, you have to be well prepared. You have to be in the right frame of mind to answer the questions and so forth. So there's a lot of factors that we need to ensure is there to be able to perform well in an exam. So this is exactly the same, that if we want to achieve the ultimate aims of liberation and enlightenment, we have to kind of prepare beforehand to ensure that we have everything we need, we accumulate both merit and wisdom to achieve these ultimate goals of enlightenment and liberation. Yes.
뭘 되긴 들어지 like.
You had a question?
Like you said that it's easier to be compassionate with our loved ones than to be compassionate with strangers or to enemies or anything like that. But sometimes people who are closest to us, maybe my family or others, they are the source of biggest pain because and the way they treat us or and they might have been very unfair and we perceive them to be unfair and that being unfair causes a lot of pain and there is no way that you can escape it because you can't escape from your family, at least not in an Indian context. So how to deal with that? Because you can't expect others, like he said, the whole responsibility lies within us, but we can't expect others to realize what they did or what they have been doing so far. That realization will not come or the change will not come from their end. It's only us who has to mend things for ourselves, for our peace. So how would somebody go about that? Because it's really hard to be compassionate with the people who have been unfair and they are so close to us.
Then Quran Tiwadir, the young and Suzuki, Nien Dara, Tindilla and Zoani, Chambanji Gomna, and Anzola Lela was was. That Tile do the Nichimi, Chunama Machinjo, Suzuki Dala Zinki, the Zula and Chamninji Dogombo and the Tits Kamoda Regiras. The Inayang and Zogi Mezinala, any the Simduk Chishudo, Kadu Yongelanas, Suzuki, the Shatasa, Nien Sisa. And Loni Ning Yabuchesa, Tindejig and Susola Chik Karelabur, Tamboma in the Legachea, Ra, Suda Matumbe Legachea, Ra, Tindechi in this man, Susola when seemed to Chamboji Chigadoas. And it and Zogi Samota in this Mishindagi and Chuba Juatan let it pick up us. Chizani Susugi Ra, Chik Samnotajo, the Juatangore Lagioras. And it did time the pick up us. 믹스에 단다기 내당도 기저시나스라 아니 직 소소기 니라 직타니 뭐 닝타니 보지서든데 미지게 소소라 마이 카요다체 직 츠도 마템베 레가도 레나 아니 심도 침보시 우치기도 왔어 디 땅안족이 소소소소 동랭 채우러 왔어 디 동랭 간지 채우러 베스
지나래 가들라 지기 소소 야부치네 수치래 유지디기 치고 기 두자 제저시자로 소와 저는 녀지체나 결틀레지 지고르면 담리 베사지 심바질레는 것들 치르고 말아 지상한 쪽이 더 마치 소소 틀레지 짠짠 차려라 다 된데 인디가라 알다til라 소소라데 단다디 올라마 태우디 베잖아 희니 당바 초도 줘봐지 츠고르스 라 근데 지금 또 마토나 콜로닐레 마지 지다이나 칼라나 수술 그러라 다 기보다 맞도 산다다이네 근데 컨트롤라니디 배도 거라 쳐라를 배 가르쳐 버렸어 라 추슈 돈 시와이나 당저 안데 따는데 가르쳐 파샤 수술 뇌진이로 통과라 추슈 돈 시는 저버 검색이 유 초도 쳐봐 라 근데 인사 아니 파기들라 그나서들라 처음에는 얘기 접어고도 봐. 접어고마더니 얘기 접어기 곰비 소남데 사토고 말아. 근데 이 켜서 접어고서다. 저런 얘기 소남사에 유치받는지 레슨선 근데 벌로 로바치 봤으면 따투나. 너 로발라 와타칼. 로파 시당로네. 봐. 근데 저는 다기 그 갈래 안데 지그들라는 단센데 슈첨부디 라시게 도로라.
So this is indeed true that it is the case that the greatest sources of our joy are the people who are closest to us, as well as the greatest sources of our hurt and disappointment also comes from the people that we hold closest to ourselves. Now, how do we exactly kind of make sense of this? Now, from the spiritual perspective, now we will discuss this when we discuss the next root text, the 8 verses of training the mind. in these moments of hurt and disappointment, from the spiritual perspective, one is advised to look at these people as your supreme teachers, and in the sense that these are the supreme objects of tolerance, supreme objects of forbearance. Without them, we do not have the means to cultivate and practice forbearance. So as such, we would not have the means to accumulate merit on the basis of cultivating forbearance. This is the manner in which a spiritual practitioner is advised to kind of reframe their response to an adverse situation like this, not to look at them as someone who hurt us, but to someone who has afforded us the opportunity to really cultivate our spiritual practice. Now, with that being said, for us, this is very, very difficult to do immediately. So we need to train our mind first. We will not be immediately able to come to a place wherein we are able to reframe our response in such a manner. So that's why daily practice is important.
다이치 등아도 콘돌라나 소소를 내준다 칼라 좋아하면 받아 뭔지 싫어. 다 콘도 찍대 빵에나 칼라나 말아 산노단다지 방고야 콘도 고야 진짜 칼라네 파쇼가를 파산다 해지다. 아 그걸 카이지 말했어. 그걸 내다지. 나는 좋아 투데라고 나나 그걸 룽도 시체타다. 나는 그걸 자동모서 슈체타가 이게 그걸 룽라레선 딘데지야. 칼라나 미 남디 미라시서 잠보지나 콘도가 시원을 쩌도가 배도 그걸 가르려기 뭐 가르시기 함무거다. 근데 저 안에 콘도를 나서기 밑을 카투 많아서 그걸 카야 말이야. 그걸 넣으셔서 띠무 그래서 가디네 예 παρ았어. 되게 완게 안에 거기 있던데 지 칸 측주불라야 남주도 저때 라시기 쇼고 그래서나 그걸 넣으셔라입니다.
So now going back to our example about how we can cognitively reframe our responses to someone who harmed us, and how we shouldn't really have an emotional reaction to such a situation, with the example of anger before. Now, exploring this further, maybe we can find a way to cognitively reframe our response in this manner. First, from a spiritual perspective, we say that all of us are influenced by the afflictions. Our actions are influenced by the afflictions. So we kind of separate the person and the afflictions to try to cognitively reframe our responses. To say that the person, we would not hold any sense of resentment towards the person because he or she is acting under the influence of the afflictions. So as such, they are kind of helpless in this situation, that once, as we personally can attest to it, that once we become consumed by these afflictions, then we really are not in the right frame of our mind. We say things that we do not mean, we do things that we do not really think through. So as such, we try to kind of separate the person, the source of our anger, and the emotion itself, the anger. And when we are able to do that, we do not look at the person as our source of anger. We look at the afflictions as the source of our suffering. And then we begin to feel a sense of empathy for the other person, that he or she is acting out of affliction, under the influence of affliction such as an anger, he or she is doing this. So as such, you do not have such a pronounced sense of hurt or such an immediate emotional response to the situation.
잠잠가서 배천치 간들리라. 캐나라 미지기 종문로지 칼라사가실 나라 깨당라. 깨당 다 담부치니베 장부제 나라 깨실을 가서 다 나라 쇼라리 깨 야보치 따라 칼라 야보즈 아리 미체 칼라도 무슨 마사추초트. 근데 샤 다디 단도처럼 깨다니 이미지 부구 된다 있는데 저가 된다. 지 탐만디 지금 잠자 직수부로래나. 다이춘이베 시대 밥에 지여다. 베 캐나라 깨다 야보친라라. 다콜로 쉐바질라고 때 내가 출라야 냥냥가. 저처럼 칼라 사이는 삼바선 줄라야 냥가라. 디칼라나 디디 내거들래 다 빼도 샤와나 알레 코 ngal 저 오늘 요리서 가게 땅래 갈아서래 인간 들 깨땅 레스트라 이네야 다다 코콘도 나 고야 돼 가서 부디기 그 지나로 잘라도 짜래 그래 아니 지저 남이다 가리네 간데 내가 셴바지기 때문에 코드네 차라마도 코라시 요 말선 나도 코를 lun라입니다 그래 다디 마서메체 디 잡루도 산마다 제 코가 데모도 깨땅 다 단달리딩 알아 엔드 지기들라나 나 처야 lun라 라오다 그래 세상에서 더 빼샤네 근데 가지고 미 스스로 신나불라야는 가르라니는 디 잡로들라 샤나 콜네다 지요래 아무나 코란 지금 만디와 지요라 디기단 레오라 지진은 코란 요모 샤샤는 난딘 콘도도 슈치타네 와디 콤베앙글이야지다 zanzara 코란 제 셴바지요 바지 잠잠 미카시 디즈만나 차기적이잖아요 루르랑이다 제가 디즈만나 콜로나 고야 거래 말데 라시기 질레오네 메긴 줘라 들아
So now, if we find it a little bit hard to make sense of this, then placing a distance and separating the person and the afflictions themselves, then we will try to explore this further with another example, and then we can experientially kind of relate to it. For example, let's say a friend invites you to their house for a dinner, and this comes out of a goodwill. This comes on the basis of love, affection for you, and your affection and love for that person to accept that invitation. Now, when you go to their house, you are about to eat dinner, and then due to a set of different circumstances, he or she becomes disturbed. Let's say they have a child in the house and the child does something wrong and he or she becomes totally disturbed. And or it could be the case that they are married or they have a partner, and then out of nowhere she or he had a fight with them, and then they become disturbed. And now, if that person who invited you, if your friend who invited you to dinner begins to say that, okay, if you want to eat dinner or eat, if you don't want to eat, just go. And if he begins to say that, then what would be our reaction to that? So we should be able to accommodate the fact that he or she is not acting out of anger towards me, right? In this situation, we should be able to accommodate the fact that due to a different set of conditions, he or she became angry. We should be able to find it within ourselves to accommodate that possibility. And if we are able to accommodate that possibility, then we do not have such an adverse reaction to it. We will be able to be empathetic, understanding, and accommodating of the fact that, okay, she suddenly became disturbed because she had like a sudden fight, a certain situation which made her really, really angry. I can understand. We are able to bring ourselves to such a place. So this is the manner in which we should think about it. Now, as opposed to this, if we react immediately thinking that, he or she called me all the way here and now she's telling me to leave if I want to leave, or she's not being very gracious, she's not being a gracious host, is this how we say it? Then we compound the already aggravated situation. So it is the case that we are normally able to accommodate that possibility, that if we see that they become disturbed due to another set of conditions, then we are able to understand that, oh, he or she is angry because of this situation. So as such, you do not have such a personal reaction to it. Yes? So similarly, with regards to our own reactions to our own suffering, we should be able to kind of be accommodating in this manner. So we'll pick up the questions in the next sessions. We'll break for lunch at this point.